film begins with the prison guard heading to the cell of the inmate, the driver, to inform him he is being released today. The guard approaches the door nervously and asks the driver to put out his hand to be cuffed, then takes him to meet the warden. The driver talks to the warden about the trouble he faced, confirming that despite being a first-time inmate, he managed to stand alone against all the prisoners and became dominant, with no one able to confront him. The warden tells him that what happened in prison is over now that he is leaving, and advises him to abandon violence and the idea of seeking revenge for his brother's death. He gives him a card for a charity that helps people with psychological issues, urging him to call them if he faces any trouble. Immediately upon his release, the driver throws the card on the ground and rushes to the nearest auto repair shop, where he finds a modern car containing a pistol and a photo of one of the people involved in his brother's murder. The driver places his photo with his brother in front of him, then drives off at maximum speed. Upon entering the city, he gets out of the car and walks down the middle of the road, indifferent to death. He enters the building, walks past the employees, until he reaches the person in the photo. The police arrive and start investigating. Meanwhile, the driver heads to an acquaintance who was able to locate all those involved in his brother's murder. It turns out this person left the car for the driver near the prison so he could drive it after his release. The driver gives his friend the agreed-upon amount for the papers containing all the information, but his friend demands a higher price. The driver becomes annoyed and makes it clear that due to his manipulation, the price will now be lower than agreed. The location's guard tries to challenge the driver, but upon seeing the tattoo on the driver's arm, which records the number of people he killed in prison, he becomes terrified, realizes the driver is dangerous, and quickly leaves. His friend also becomes scared and hands him his money along with the requested papers. The driver takes the papers and leaves. The driver sits alone in the car, examining the photos and addresses of everyone he intends to kill. Simultaneously, the police manage to review the camera footage and see the driver killing the man in cold blood, as if it were a personal matter. The detective notices that the victim was shocked immediately upon seeing the driver, suggesting prior knowledge. Elsewhere, the killer, the country's most famous hitman, receives a call from his associate to execute a dangerous target named the driver. The killer views the driver's photo and prepares his weapons, determined to eliminate him quickly before he can kill anyone else. The officer goes to meet the detective, who surprises him by saying she knows the killer. His name is the driver, and he was released from prison days ago. She explains that before prison, he worked with his brother robbing banks, with the driver acting as the team's getaway driver. Sarah details how the driver's superior driving skills allowed him to escape the police once, but they were ambushed by an armed group upon reaching his brother's house, as if the group knew everything. A video recording was found at the scene. After killing the rest of his brother's gang, the group aimed their guns at the driver and his brother, demanding they reveal the money's location or be killed. The driver's brother tried to negotiate and refused to disclose the location, but the driver feared for his brother and revealed where the money was. As soon as they knew the location, one of the assailants slit his brother's throat, and the other shot the driver in the head. Both fell, seemingly dead. But miraculously, the driver woke up in the hospital. The bullet entered his head and exited his mouth without damaging vital organs. The doctor fitted a metal plate in his head so he could live normally. He was subsequently sent to prison for robbery. Despite his injury, he fought alone against all the inmates and never joined any gang. The detective concludes he is now hunting everyone involved in his brother's death. The driver reaches the second target. The police arrive at the scene, realizing the driver is responsible for the murder. The surprise is that another person attacked him, and the two exchanged gunfire. According to witnesses, the second person was handsome, like a movie star. The officer finds Detective's statement strange and realizes the situation is spiraling out of control, demanding they act quickly. The driver arrives at the bar where the third target works. He pulls out his phone and begs the driver to call his son and tell him that he failed him. The driver leaves the man bleeding and exits to call the son and inform him of his father's death. The next day, the officer talks to the detective, expressing his feeling that the driver killed the third person in the bar. Since that person is still alive in the hospital, hovering between life and death, the driver will likely go there to confirm his death. The detective argues that if he goes alone, it will be too dangerous without police backup. But the officer refuses to take backup and hangs up. At that moment, the driver is driving. As soon as he hears on the news that the man is in the hospital, he decides to rush there to finish him off. The driver drives away quickly, but he is surprised by the killer chasing him on the road. The wound is superficial, and the driver manages to escape before the killer can shoot him again. The driver then visits an elderly woman, aiming his gun at her while she is asleep to ask about her husband's whereabouts. The driver is dismayed when she tells him her husband died 3 years ago while he was in prison. The woman wakes up and stitches the wound on his neck. The driver explains he came to kill her husband because he was the one who informed the group that killed his brother. The woman objects, explaining it's impossible that her husband did that because he loved them deeply. It is then revealed that this woman is the driver's mother and her husband was his father. Despite the driver's suspicion of his father's involvement because he consulted him about the robbery as a former bank robbery expert, his mother assures him that his father loved them, was profoundly saddened by what happened, became ill, and died heartbroken after losing both his sons in one day. Convinced of his father's innocence, the driver decides to go after the last person on his list, hoping to learn who the real informant was. En route, he hears the voice of a preacher on the radio speaking about revenge and hatred, warning people that pursuing vengeance will lead them nowhere, and that forgiveness when capable is the foundation of life. The preacher asserts that one can only live a proper life by avoiding revenge and focusing on one's life and loved ones. The driver is deeply affected by the words, but the idea of revenge still controls him. He decides to quickly move on to the last person to learn everything and then kill him. The officer arrived at the police station to congratulations from colleagues who believed the driver fled out of fear of him, although the driver was the one who spared him. The detective congratulated him and informed him she had identified all individuals involved in the case, including the preacher. The driver arrives at the preacher's location and enters his tent, seeing him speaking to people about the Bible and religion. The preacher is shocked when he sees the driver standing before him. He asks the people to sing and goes to speak with the driver, revealing he expected his visit, as he hasn't been able to forgive himself since his brother's death. The preacher's wife enters and asks if there is a problem, but the preacher tells her the driver is an old friend and asks her to return home, promising he will return later that day. Once she leaves, the preacher and the driver exit the tent and walk near the beach. The driver asks about the child with his wife, and the preacher reveals he is an adopted son, explaining that he adopted 5 street children to raise them well and compensate them for their difficult circumstances. as well as to atone for his past sins. The preacher asks the driver to forget revenge and focus on his life and the good he can do if he lives normally. The preacher admits he did many wrong things but never killed anyone. When he went with his friends to rob the driver and his brother, he did not know they would kill them, and he broke down when one of them slit his brother's throat and killed him. Since then, he has suffered from nightmares. He explains that he spent his share of the stolen money on alcohol until he was imprisoned for 3 years. There, his life changed, and he found faith, emerging as a righteous person desperate to atone for his sins. Despite the sincerity of the preacher's words regarding his transformation, the driver remained resolute, unable to forgive him for his brother's murder. The preacher knelt and closed his eyes, speaking of faith and asking God to forgive the driver, confirming that he forgave the driver. Deeply moved by his words, the driver decided to spare him after confirming his genuine remorse. He fired a shot next to his head, causing the preacher to fall, believing he had been hit. However, the preacher found himself unharmed and urged the driver to return to his family, follow the path of good, and abandon evil. The driver left the location. The driver re-enters the tent, holding his photo with his brother, reflecting on everything that happened since the robbery. Suddenly, the killer appears and aims his gun at him. The officer also arrives at the tent. He is on the phone with the detective, informing her he is at the tent with the driver and is about to go in to finish him and close the case forever. The killer tells the driver that he is a hired assassin, and the person who commissioned the hit on the driver is likely connected to his case and possibly the gang leader. The driver is surprised by this information. Both men are startled by the officer pointing his gun at them, demanding the killer drop his weapon. The killer reluctantly complies, only to be shocked when the officer shoots the driver in the head, killing him instantly. The killer is outraged, realizing that the officer was the client who hired him to kill the driver because the officer was also involved in the case and feared the driver would kill him too. What the officer did not know was that the list the driver had only contained the names of those who killed his brother, and the driver was unaware of the officer's involvement. The two men leave the tent. The officer is on the phone with his wife, telling her the case is over, and he got rid of the person who wanted to kill him. However, he is suddenly shot in the head by the driver, who explains he is still alive because the bullet hit the metal plate in his head. The driver then fires several more shots into the officer's body before walking away, finally finding peace because he managed to avenge his brother. We hope you enjoyed this summary. Please subscribe, like the video, and leave your comments below. We'll see you soon with more action-packed movie summaries.